The worst part was, I introduced them. I watched from the corner of the conference room, half listening as Derek spun another charming anecdote, making my wife laugh the way she hadn't with me in months. Her hand lingered on his shoulder longer than necessary when she whispered something in his ear. That easy, intimate touch didn't match a professional introduction or a passing joke. No, it felt like foreplay. Public foreplay. My stomach twisted, but I plastered on a smile and sipped my scotch. I'd built this business with Derek, trusted him with numbers, clients, my secrets. I never thought I'd have to guard him from the one person I loved most. It's not just betrayal when your best friend screws your wife, it's annihilation. Derek always had everything: the natural charisma, the effortless success, the jawline that made women lean in closer without realizing they were doing it. And now he had her. Madison. My Madison, who used to curl up on the couch with me and call me her safe place. Now she barely met my eyes when we were alone. She started working later, dressing sharper, like the Madison I'd known in college had time traveled to reinvent herself for someone new. And I'd been too busy, too trusting to notice. Until the week Derek moved back to Chicago. He was supposed to be a temporary presence, handling acquisitions while I kept the office stable. We were a two-man powerhouse, him, the closer, me, the strategist. We joked that we were like Jordan and Pippen, but I should have known that meant someone always had to play second. The cracks started small. Late-night texts from her that ended abruptly when I walked in the room. The sudden interest in Derek's social media posts. Then, one night, she came home drunk, heels in one hand, her blouse a little too rumpled. Long dinner with the marketing girls, she'd mumbled. I smelled the cologne. Not mine. Not hers. And it wasn't until I saw her phone light up while she was in the shower that I confirmed what my gut already knew. Derek, can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? It felt like something inside me splintered. My fingertips went numb. I should have thrown the phone, smashed it against the wall. But instead, I sat there and read every word. And here I was now, watching the two of them from across a room full of shareholders and champagne glasses, trying to stay calm while the man I'd once called a brother placed his hand on the small of my wife's back like he owned her. I hated him. And I hated her. But what scared me most was how much I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. She caught my eye then, Madison. A brief flicker of guilt crossed her face. Or maybe it was fear. But it disappeared too quickly to mean anything. Derek turned, smiling that signature smile, and raised his glass toward me. To old friends and new beginnings, he said, voice smooth as polished marble. I raised my glass too. The bourbon burned as it went down, but I didn't flinch. New beginnings? Huh? We'll see about that. I thought knowing was the worst part. It wasn't. The worst part was seeing the photos. Holding them in my hands, black and white stills from a private investigator who was worth every dollar I paid him, and every ounce of my pride I had to swallow to hire him in the first place. There they were, Madison and Derek at a boutique hotel in River North. Her hand gripping his jacket, his mouth pressed to her throat, the unmistakable arch of her back as they disappeared into a room under his name. The timestamp was from a Tuesday night. She'd said she was with her sister. Her sister, who I'd texted earlier that night asking what wine Madison liked. No response. Now I knew why. I stared at the photos in silence, numb. You always imagine how you'll feel: rage, heartbreak, maybe even some twisted relief, but nothing prepares you for the sterile weight of evidence. It's not like catching them in the act. It's colder. More precise. Like death by scalpel instead of a shotgun. I didn't tell her that night. I couldn't. I slept beside her like I didn't already know she belonged to someone else. I lay still, listening to her breathe, trying to remember when the sound of her exhale used to calm me instead of make me sick. But I had a plan. 3 days later, we hosted the annual launch gala for our firm, think upscale, overfunded, and camera-friendly. The kind of event where people dressed for power more than style. Derek was, of course, the star of the night. Smiling for every photo, flanked by our board members, with Madison in a stunning black dress on his arm, not mine. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I wasn't sure whether she wanted to get caught or just didn't care. I didn't confront her in private. No, that wasn't enough. Not for this. Not for the man who'd been at my wedding. Not for the woman who promised me forever. So, right after the champagne toast, I tapped the mic. The room went still. I'd like to say a few words. I began, smiling like a politician, voice smooth as melted butter. Tonight, we celebrate our success. Growth. Vision. Trust. I paused. I heard Derek laugh quietly, probably already planning to take credit for my words. But trust, I continued, is a fragile thing. It can be built over decades and destroyed in a single night. The silence was thick. I recently had the pleasure of discovering just how fragile it can be. People shifted. I saw Madison's face tighten. Derek looked up from his phone, eyebrows knitting together. I want to thank my wife, Madison, I said, locking eyes with her, and my business partner, Derek, for teaching me what betrayal really looks like. A ripple of whispers. Confused murmurs. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and held it up. Photographic proof. For anyone curious. Derek took a step forward, his face pale. Ryan, he started. Don't, I said, my voice flat now. Just don't. And then, Madison said it. The line that burned its way into my memory. Well, it was inevitable. I flinched. She didn't cry, didn't plead, just looked at me with eyes empty of anything close to remorse. Derek had the audacity to look almost embarrassed, but not enough to stop smirking when he thought I wasn't watching. That was the moment. Not the photos. Not the text I found at 2 a.m. that said, last night was perfect. Let's do it again Thursday. No. The moment that broke me was hearing her say it was inevitable, like I'd always been standing on the edge of this cliff, and she'd just given me a polite push. I put the envelope down on the nearest table and walked out. No yelling. No tears. Just silence. Silence that screamed louder than anything. 2 weeks passed. Long enough for the whispers to fade from the office halls, but not long enough for the bruises to fade from my chest. Not physical bruises, emotional ones. The kind that live under your ribs. The kind that ache when you breathe too deep. Derek hadn't tried to apologize. Not really. I received a single email after the gala. Subject line. Let's talk like adults. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. What could he possibly say? Sorry for screwing your wife, but I had to scratch an itch? And Madison? She moved out. Quietly. Coldly. Left her keys on the counter with a note that said, you were always too safe. That one stayed on the fridge longer than it should have. Like a scar I wasn't ready to cover. I spent my days drowning in work. I spent my nights avoiding sleep. And then, out of nowhere, came the invitation. Derek's housewarming party. The ball's on that man. A sleek black envelope arrived at my office, hand-delivered by a courier. Inside, a card with his signature bold font. Come see the new place. Bring a guest. Drinks, music, memories, let's move forward, not backward. I almost laughed. The arrogance. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a dare. I wasn't going to go. But I went. Not out of curiosity. Not out of masochism. Out of calculation. Because I remembered something. A name he'd mentioned once during a drunken Vegas trip. A sister. Younger. Sheltered. Off limits, he'd said. Fiercely protected. Emily. I'd never met her. She lived out of state for years, finishing grad school in D.C. Derek talked about her like she was his secret pride, a porcelain doll he kept high on a shelf, away from the reach of men like us. But now she was in town, and I wondered what porcelain sounded like when it cracked. Derek's new condo sat in the heart of River North, glass, steel, and far too expensive for someone who hadn't yet bought me out of our company. The doorman nodded me in, but not before giving me a look that screamed, "You sure you belong here?" Inside, the place reeked of wealth and curated taste. Clean lines, cold colors. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a trophy case. And he was the trophy. I kept to the edges, drink in hand, watching people who used to shake my hand now glance away like I carried the sin of failure. That's the thing about scandal. People love to talk about it, but not with you. That's when I saw her. Not what I expected. She wasn't dressed like the women Derek usually paraded around. No tight dress, no high heels. She wore a slate blue sundress, something soft and unpretentious, with her dark hair tied in a loose braid over one shoulder. She stood near the terrace, sipping wine and studying the skyline like it meant something to her. Emily. I knew before I introduced myself. She looked untouched. Not innocent in a childish way, but unspoiled by Derek's world. There was depth in her eyes. Sadness, maybe. Or restraint. I approached slowly. Didn't try to charm her. Didn't smile like a jackass. Mind if I join you? I asked, nodding to the view beside her. She turned slightly, surprised. It's your party, isn't it? No, I said. It's his. I'm just a ghost. Her brow furrowed, then softened. You're Ryan. The way she said my name, soft, measured, almost apologetic, caught me off guard. You've heard of me, I said, more observation than question. She nodded, setting her wine down on the edge of the marble counter. He used to talk about you. Said you were the only person he ever trusted. I scoffed before I could stop myself. Funny way of showing it. I know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We stood in silence for a beat, the murmur of partygoers muffled behind us. I didn't want to come tonight, she admitted. But he said if I didn't, people would talk. People always talk, I replied, finishing my drink. But what they say changes depending on who's holding the mic. She looked at me then, really looked. Her gaze lingered on my jaw, my collarbone, like she was trying to see the parts that still hurt. I'm sorry, she said. You didn't do anything. No, she said. But I know the damage he can do. There it was. The crack. The opening. A seed planted. I didn't flirt. Not yet. That wasn't the play. But I gave her a smile, half bitter, half warm. Well, I said, turning to leave, maybe next time we can talk somewhere less poisoned. She hesitated, then pulled her phone from her purse. Do you want my number? I didn't reach for it right away. I let the moment stretch. Just enough tension. Then I nodded. Derek might have won the first round. But this game was far from over. The first time I texted her, I deleted it twice. Hey, this is Ryan. From the party. Too dry. Hey, it was great talking to you. Let's get a drink sometime. Too forward. I settled on something simple. Ryan, you still owe me a conversation away from marble countertops and overpriced Pinot. She responded 20 minutes later. Emily, only if the wine's cheaper and the view's better. It wasn't a date. Not officially. But I knew what I was doing. We met at a charity art event a week later. It was at this small gallery tucked between a bakery and a bar in Lincoln Park, an old renovated brick building with bad lighting and better people watching. I saw her before she saw me. She wore a deep green blouse that fell just past her hips, tight black jeans, ankle boots. Simple. Beautiful. She stood near a painting of a woman with her back turned, skin bare, spine bowed, face hidden in shadows. Emily stared at it like she recognized the woman. Maybe she did. Looks like she's leaving something behind, I said quietly as I stepped beside her. She didn't flinch. She looks like she doesn't have a choice, she said. And just like that, we were in it again. That strange intimacy we slipped into like it had been waiting for us. We didn't talk about Derek. Not directly. But I asked about her life, real questions. What she did. What she wanted to do. She told me she worked in nonprofit grant writing, that she'd always felt pulled toward helping people, even when her family had expected something shinier. Derek wanted me to go into law. Said the Emily Law Group had a good ring to it, she said with a tight smile. He ever ask what you wanted? I asked. She tilted her head, looked me over like she was trying to decide if I was really asking or just making conversation. No, she said. He assumed. I nodded. Sounds like him. A small silence followed, but not uncomfortable. There was something between us already, a gravity, an unspoken understanding. Two people who knew what it felt like to be orbiting a man who always expected to be the sun. We shared a drink afterward. Just one. Bourbon for me. Riesling for her. You don't strike me as a sweet wine person, I teased. She smiled. I'm not. But sometimes I like pretending I am. When I dropped her off, I didn't ask to come inside. I didn't even lean in. But I lingered at the driver's side door, and she lingered too. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not pretending you don't see me. That sentence sat with me for hours after. Over the next few weeks, I started weaving myself into her life. Not too much. Just enough. A good luck text before her grant presentation. A photo of a gallery opening I thought she'd like. A coffee left on her doorstep when she told me she was having a hard morning. Every interaction was a thread. And I was building something deliberate, subtle, careful. She was responding too. Slower than most women might. But that made her more interesting. More. Worth the patience. She wasn't part of Derek's smug empire. That much was clear. The more she talked, the more I saw how he'd clipped her wings under the guise of protecting her. He managed her dating life, warned her off anyone beneath her. He reviewed the resumes of guys she matched with on dating apps. She once told me, laughing and embarrassed, that Derek made her uninstall Tinder because it lowered her value. That's when I knew something else. Emily wasn't just lonely. She was suffocating. And I could be air. We bumped into Derek one afternoon while walking through Millennium Park. It wasn't planned. I hadn't warned her. I didn't even know he'd be there. He was with two board members, sunglasses on, his posture arrogant even in motion. His eyes caught hers first. Then they found me. And in that flicker of a second, between his eyes narrowing and the corner of his mouth twitching upward, I saw it. Recognition. Not of what we were, but of what could be. He said nothing, just nodded once, as if acknowledging a power shift he couldn't control. Emily smiled politely, distant and detached. Friend of yours? I asked, feigning casual interest. Unfortunately, she replied. We kept walking. But in that moment, I knew. Derek felt it. His world, perfect, polished, unshakable, had a fault line now. And I was the tremor crawling underneath. She called me at 11:17 p.m. No text first. No warning. Just a direct call. Something about it felt personal in a way texts never could. I almost didn't answer. I'd been staring at the ceiling in my half-lit bedroom, imagining her next to me, wondering how much of what I was doing still felt like a plan. But I picked up. Hey, I said, keeping my voice steady. Did I wake you? She asked, her voice soft, cautious. No. I couldn't sleep. A pause. Then, me neither. She didn't need to say why. We talked for over an hour. About nothing, and about everything. The kinds of conversations you only have with someone you trust, or someone you want to. She told me about her job, how her current nonprofit was months behind on funding, and that the board kept cutting corners. She told me how she felt stuck, too underpaid to feel proud, too passionate to walk away. I just want to do something that matters, she said. You are, I replied. Even if they don't see it? There was silence on her end. I imagined her curled up on her couch, one leg tucked under her, hair messy, no makeup. The real version of her. Not the Derek-approved one. Thank you, she whispered. I meant it. And that scared me a little. Because I wasn't supposed to care this much. We started seeing each other more. At first, it was casual. Coffee near her office. A walk after dark in Lincoln Park. One Saturday afternoon we ended up on the lakefront, barefoot in the sand, watching tourists take photos of the skyline while she talked about moving out of her apartment. Derek helped me get it, she said. He said I couldn't trust brokers not to take advantage of me. What he meant was, he didn't want you living somewhere he couldn't control. She didn't deny it. That was when I offered. Come stay at my place. The look she gave me was half shock, half something else. Not fear. Not quite excitement either. It was like she wanted to believe the offer was pure. I couldn't, she said. You could, I countered. It's not a proposition. I have a guest room. You'd be doing me a favor. Honestly, give me a reason to stop living in silence. It took her 2 days to say yes. She moved in lightly. A couple of bags. A plant she named Margot. 3 books, a half-empty bottle of lavender essential oil, and a framed photo of her and her mom at a vineyard. No Derek in sight. The first few nights were quiet. We kept to our routines. Separate rooms. Separate rhythms. But sometimes, when we crossed paths in the kitchen in the early morning, there was a tension. A crackling. One night, we sat on the balcony with a bottle of red wine and a blanket draped between us. The city hummed below, but we didn't speak. Not for a while. Then, without turning to me, she said, Do you ever think some people are just wired to take? I looked at her. She was staring at the skyline, glass in hand, her fingers curled so tightly around the stem I thought it might break. Yes, I said. And some of us are wired to give until we don't recognize ourselves anymore. Her eyes met mine. And for the first time, she let me see all of it. The hurt. The exhaustion. The quiet hope she hadn't dared to say aloud. You make me feel like I matter, she said. You do, I replied. And not because of Derek. Not because of anyone else. Just because you're you. Her lip trembled slightly. She looked down, as if ashamed of how much she needed to hear that. I didn't touch her. Not then. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt. From what? Over the next week, I started noticing small things. The way she'd hum when she made coffee. How she always left the bathroom fan running too long. How she'd sit on the floor instead of the couch when reading, like she didn't trust comfort she hadn't earned. She was becoming part of my life, thread by thread. One morning, I caught her dancing in the kitchen in one of my t-shirts, long enough to cover everything but her legs. She had earbuds in, twirling with the sunlight cutting across her bare thighs. She didn't see me, and I didn't interrupt. Because in that moment, I forgot why I started any of this. But Derek noticed. Of course he did. It started with texts. Derek, you and my sister seeing a lot of each other lately? Derek, you know she's fragile. Don't fuck around with her head. I didn't respond. So he called. I let it ring. Then, 2 days later, he showed up. At my office. Unannounced. He walked in like he still owned the place, sunglasses hooked in his collar, jaw tense, eyes calculating. We need to talk, he said. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. About business? I asked, feigning innocence. About Emily. My pulse didn't flinch. She's an adult, Derek. She can make her own decisions. He stepped closer, voice low. You think I don't know what this is? What is? This little thing you're doing. Using her to get back at me. Planting yourself in her life like a fucking weed. I didn't blink. She came to me. I said, maybe you should ask yourself why. For a second, I saw it. The break in his armor. The twitch at the edge of his mouth. He hated not having control. Stay away from her, he growled. She's not yours to control. He stared at me, long and hard. And then he left. No threats. No parting shots. But I knew what that silence meant. He was starting to unravel. And I wasn't sure if I felt victorious. Or afraid of what I was becoming. It happened the weekend we escaped Derek. Emily had been spiraling all week after he cornered her at her apartment complex, unannounced, just 2 days after storming into my office. She came home shaken, eyes red, voice low, and that subtle tremble in her hands she tried to hide by clenching her phone too tight. He said I was embarrassing him. She whispered that night, curled into the far end of my couch. That people were talking, that I needed to remember where I came from. I wanted to punch something. Him, specifically. So I said, let's go. Go where? Anywhere that's not here. You need air. I know a place. A cabin. 3 hours north, tucked near the edge of a lake I used to visit with my uncle. No cell signal. No city noise. Just with smoke, water, and the clean kind of silence. We left Friday morning with 2 bags, a cooler, and not much else. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, pulled her hair into a braid, and got in the car. The cabin was small, stone fireplace, warm wood everywhere, a deck that stretched over the edge of the lake like it belonged there. She gasped when we arrived. It's beautiful. Just wait until you see it at night. We spent the first day doing nothing. I made grilled cheese on a cast iron pan. She drank wine barefoot on the dock, jeans rolled up, toes grazing the surface of the lake. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw her shoulders completely relax. That night, we lit a fire and sat close, too close. On the couch, the flicker of flame dancing across her skin. She wore a soft gray hoodie and pajama shorts, and she'd pulled her legs beneath her like she didn't know what that pose did to a man watching her from 6 inches away. We talked, not just about Derek, about music, about books, about childhood. She told me how her mother used to sing Fleetwood Mac while cooking dinner, how she'd learned to bake bread from YouTube videos during lockdown, how she always wanted to live near the ocean but never admitted it to anyone. I listened like my life depended on it. And then she said, softly, "You're not like him." "Who?" "You know who." She turned to face me, her knees brushing mine. "You look like him. You even move like him sometimes. But you're not like him, are you?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to promise her that I wasn't using her, that I wasn't still playing a long, vengeful game. But I couldn't lie, so I said nothing. She leaned in before I did. Her lips brushed mine, light, cautious, tasting. My breath hitched. I didn't move at first. Maybe I was testing myself. But the moment her hand slid to the back of my neck, something inside me shattered. I kissed her, and it wasn't soft anymore. It was hunger. It was 2 people breaking out of cages, clawing for air in each other's mouths. Her hands buried in my shirt, my fingers at the hem of her shorts. We moved with heat, pressing, pulling, her thighs wrapping around my waist like she'd been waiting years to do it. We didn't make it to the bedroom. It happened right there, in front of the fire. And it wasn't just sex. It was emotion. Desperate. Reckless. Raw. She cried afterward. Not from sadness. From relief. I held her while she curled into my chest, her fingers absently tracing circles over the skin just below my collarbone. No words. Just the sound of the fire dying down and the soft, even rhythm of her breathing. I should have felt like I'd won. Derek had taken my wife. And now I'd taken his sister. But lying there in the flickering dark, her body tucked into mine, all I felt was lost. Because I didn't plan to feel this. The next morning, I made coffee while she slept. I stood at the edge of the deck, cup in hand, heart rattling like something out of tune. My phone buzzed on the windowsill. "Derek, you've been quiet." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "She's not yours to protect anymore." No response. I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked back at the small bedroom, the sight of Emily tangled in blankets like she belonged there. And for the first time since this began, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't revenge anymore. I didn't want to break Derek. I wanted her. And maybe I already had. When we got back to the city, something had changed. Emily still smiled the same. Still made coffee in my kitchen like it was hers. But there was a new lightness in her step, like she'd finally thrown off the last of Derek's chains. She laughed more freely, took long showers, wore my t-shirts to bed without flinching. But with her liberation came a growing threat. Derek was watching. He didn't say it, but I could feel it, see it. The little things, mutual friends suddenly going silent. Invitations to networking events that stopped arriving. A few of my clients, ones I'd brought into the company myself, mysteriously pulling out of deals. Derek never attacked directly. He never had to. He was the kind of man who operated with surgical precision, cutting quietly, bleeding you out before you ever saw the blade. And Emily? She was starting to notice. It started with the confrontation. She came home late one evening after running errands and dropped her purse on the floor with a loud thud. Her face was tight, her movements jerky. I was at the kitchen counter, reading through contract revisions, but when I looked up, I knew instantly something was wrong. He followed me, she said. My heart dropped. What? Derek. His car. I noticed him on Wabash near the florist, and then again outside the grocery store. He didn't even try to hide it. Just sat there. I stood slowly, my hands tightening into fists. Did he say anything? She nodded. Yeah. He got out when I walked toward him. Said he just wanted to talk. That he missed me. That I was being brainwashed. I swallowed hard. What did you say? I told him to go fuck himself, she said, then broke into a nervous laugh. Not in those words, but close. I smiled, but it was brittle. The victory was hollow. Then she added, he said you were using me. That you're not who you pretend to be. The air seemed to still. She looked up at me, searching. Why would he say that? I stepped forward, careful, deliberate. Because he can't stand the idea of someone else being closer to you than he is. He's always needed control. She nodded slowly, but her eyes lingered on me for a beat too long. The first seed of doubt. It was subtle, but I felt it. Over the next week, I was more careful. I deleted text threads, hid the photos from the private investigator in a locked folder, set new passwords on my laptop. Not because I was ashamed, but because Emily was getting closer. Too close to the origin of all this. One night, while she slept, I caught myself staring at her, guilt thick in my chest. She looked so peaceful, her cheek pressed to my pillow, one hand resting on my stomach like it belonged there. And maybe it did. But what had started as a plan, revenge, sweet and clean, was now something messy, real. And I didn't know if I could outrun the consequences of that. Derek wasn't done. He showed up at Emily's work. She called me after, her voice shaking. He came into the lobby, she said. Tried to act casual. Said he was checking in on a grant application, but I knew it was about me. Did he talk to anyone? Just me. Said you've been lying. That I need to wake up. That you're not who I think you are. Her voice cracked. Ryan, he said he has proof. The world tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk hard enough for the wood to groan beneath my fingers. Proof of what? She was silent for a beat too long. Then, I don't know. He said he'd show me if I meet with him. No, I said immediately. Emily, you can't. He's playing you. I know, she whispered. But I need to know what he thinks he has. I need to be sure. I closed my eyes, heart pounding. This was it. The fault line I'd been dancing on was cracking wide open. If Derek had somehow pieced it together, my involvement with her, my initial intent, he could rip it all down. And the worst part? I wouldn't be able to stop him. Because Emily deserved to know. She deserved the truth. Even if it broke me. That night, she didn't come home. I waited up, pacing the apartment like a man on death row. Every minute dragged. Every sound outside the window made my heart stutter. When the key finally turned in the lock just after 1 a.m., I froze. She stepped inside, quiet, pale. I stood, ready to speak, but she held up a hand. I'm tired, she said. Let's talk in the morning. Then she disappeared into the guest room. Not our room. The silence that followed was colder than anything I'd felt since Madison left. And I knew. Derek had said something. Maybe not everything, but enough. I didn't sleep. I lay awake on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling while the hours dragged their claws across the dark. Every creak of the floorboard upstairs, every sigh of the wind outside, made me think she was walking out. She didn't. She just stayed locked in the guest room. And I stayed silent. By morning, the weight in my chest was unbearable. When she finally came downstairs, barefoot, hair tied up, wearing the hoodie she used to steal from my closet, I could tell immediately that everything had changed. Her eyes didn't search for mine. She didn't kiss me good morning. She moved like a guest in someone else's house. I poured her coffee without asking, set the mug on the counter between us. You talked to him, I said. She nodded. I didn't believe him, she replied. Not at first. Her voice wasn't angry. That made it worse. What did he tell you? She stared into her cup like it might offer the answers she wanted to hear. He said you came after me. Not because of me. Because of him. He said you were using me to get back at him for Madison. I exhaled slowly. And she looked up. He showed me the private investigator's invoice. My name on the report. Dates that match when you and I accidentally bumped into each other at that gallery. The fact that you already knew who I was before the party. My stomach twisted. Emily. He said you were obsessed with destroying him. That I was the most effective weapon. I stepped around the counter. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just a slow, honest movement. That's how it started, I said. But it's not what it became. She flinched, which hurt more than I was ready for. I need you to understand something, I continued. When I first saw you, you were a way in. A way to get under his skin. I won't lie to you. But the more time I spent with you, the more the plan stopped matching. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the coffee down. You played me, she whispered. No. I tried to, I said, voice rough. But it stopped being a game the first time I saw you laugh without looking over your shoulder. She blinked fast, like she was holding something back. You let me fall for you, she said, knowing you were lying. That everything, every moment, every kiss, was built on manipulation. I stepped closer. I didn't let you fall, I said. I fell with you. Harder than I expected. Deeper than I knew I could after what happened with Madison. This stopped being about Derek a long time ago. She turned away, arms crossed, breathing uneven. You don't get to rewrite this now, Ryan, she said. You calculated me. You tracked me like I was part of a blueprint. I know, I said, swallowing hard. And I will never forgive myself for that. She didn't answer. Just walked to the window, her arms still folded tightly across her chest, like she was holding herself together. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, do you know how much I trusted you? I did. And that's what made this unbearable. I would have burned every bridge for you, she said, including him. But now I don't even know who I am to you. If I was ever real, or just a move. You were real, I said. The most real thing I've felt in years. She turned, tears in her eyes now, her lips trembling. You broke him, she said. But you broke me too. The air left my lungs. I'm sorry. I know, she said. But sorry doesn't undo what you did. And then she walked past me. No suitcase. No drama. Just the quiet sound of her footsteps across the floor and the door opening, then closing. I didn't follow. I stood there, alone in the kitchen, where it had all started, plans, pretenses, careful lies. And now it ended the only way it ever could. With silence. She didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't even block me, just disappeared. That was the worst part. The absence of anger. The absence of anything. It was like I'd been erased. Like everything we'd shared had been folded neatly, sealed in a box, and buried so deep it might as well have never existed. I told myself to give her space. That maybe she needed time. But space turned into days. Days turned into a week. And a week became a slow rot that ate through everything I thought I still believed in. The office was different without her. Not that she'd ever worked there, but her presence had followed me into the halls, her laughter an echo in my ears, her scent lingering on my clothes like a ghost I couldn't shake. Derek, on the other hand, was falling apart in full view. He started showing up late, missing meetings, snapping at staff he used to charm like second nature. His tailored suits were still crisp, but the man inside them was fraying at the edges. Word was spreading, quietly, at first. Board members raising eyebrows, clients noticing the shift. Then came the final blow. A finance meeting where he slurred his words in front of a dozen shareholders. Bourbon in his coffee cup. Eyes glassy. I built this company, he mumbled, gripping the conference table like it might float him out of the mess he was drowning in. I built all of this. Not him. Everyone knew who him was. I didn't interrupt. Didn't gloat. I just sat there in my crisp white shirt, expression neutral, while the king watched his crown slip quietly to the floor. After that, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. I tried calling Emily once. Just once. It rang until voicemail, and I hung up without leaving one. What could I say? I love you? I'm sorry I used you to hurt your brother, but ended up breaking my own heart instead. I wrote her a letter. Pages of it. I told her how the plan started. I didn't sugarcoat it. I confessed to the calculation, the manipulation, the selfishness. But I also told her about the things that weren't part of the plan. The way her laugh crept into my thoughts at 2 a.m. The way she said thanks after sex, like it wasn't just physical, it was safe, maybe for the first time. The way she cried against my chest, not from pain, but from finally being allowed to. I never sent it. I kept it folded in the drawer by my bed, ink smudged from the night I bled tequila onto the paper and sobbed like someone I didn't recognize. Derek tried to claw his way back. He left a voicemail one night. She's not speaking to me either. Happy? You didn't just fuck me over. You took everything. You win, man. I didn't respond. Because I didn't win. This wasn't victory. This was aftermath. Ashes in my mouth. Silence in my home. Her toothbrush still on my bathroom counter. I almost threw it out. But I didn't. One afternoon, a month after she left, I found myself outside her old building. Just sitting in my car like some washed-up creep, hoping for, what, exactly? Closure? A glimpse? A fucking miracle? Instead, I saw the landlord changing locks. She gone? I asked. The guy nodded. Few weeks ago. Left no forwarding address. Said she was moving somewhere quieter. I nodded like that meant anything. Somewhere quieter. Quieter than me. Quieter than Derek. Quieter than the war we made of her life. That night, I walked into the apartment, turned on every light, and stood in the living room staring at the spot where she used to sit cross-legged on the floor. I was alone, but I'd been alone before. This time, it felt earned. Because in trying to break Derek, I'd become him. And I'd lost the only thing that ever made me want to be anything different. It started with a text. Just one line, no punctuation, no emotion. Can we meet? Emily. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if it was a mistake. A delayed message. A cruel joke. But it was her number, and the timestamp was current. Name the place, I wrote back. She chose a bench. The same one where we'd once watched the skyline shimmer across the river, her head on my shoulder, legs curled beneath her, murmuring dreams about oceans and escape. This time, she was already sitting when I arrived. Hair tied up. No makeup. Black jeans, gray sweater. Simpler than I remembered, but more beautiful for it. I approached slowly, unsure if I should smile. Unsure if I deserved to. She didn't get up. Didn't look at me. I sat beside her. For a while, neither of us said anything. Just the wind, the water, the sharp, clean bite of spring in the air. Then she broke the silence. I read your letter. My pulse thudded in my chest. You weren't supposed to. I went back for my mail. The landlord gave it to me. She finally looked at me. You said it wasn't revenge anymore. It wasn't. I believe you, she said. And that makes it worse. I swallowed. Why? Because if you'd been a liar all the way through, I could have hated you cleanly. But you weren't. You became something real. Which means I didn't just lose trust. I lost us. Her voice didn't break. Mine almost did. I'm not here to win you back, I said. I just want you to hear one thing. No games. No agenda. Just the truth. She turned toward me, knees drawn up on the bench, like she was preparing herself. I've been a lot of things in my life, calculating, guarded, sometimes cruel when I thought it kept me safe. But what I felt with you. I paused. That was the first time I didn't want to be that version of me anymore. You made me want to be better. Not to get you. Just to deserve you. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Then why didn't you stop? She asked. I didn't know how. I lived so long inside the plan that I didn't know when it stopped being about Derek and started being about you. She looked away again, blinking fast. He's a wreck, by the way. Rehab. Left the company. I nodded. I heard. He blames you. I don't blame him. She looked back at me, tilting her head. But you won, didn't you? No, I said, shaking my head slowly. Winning would have meant getting justice without losing the one good thing I didn't see coming. We sat in silence again. The wind picked up. She shivered, just slightly. Without thinking, I slipped off my coat and draped it around her shoulders. She didn't push it away. She didn't thank me either. Eventually, she spoke. You broke him, she said, voice low. But you broke me too. I closed my eyes. Took it. Let it cut deep. I know. She stood, shrugging the coat off, handing it back. I don't know what happens next, she said. But I needed to hear it from you. Not Derek. Not my memories. You. I stood too. And now that you have? She stared at me as if memorizing my face. The soft lines. The broken edges. The man behind the mask. I'm going to take time, she said, to rebuild. Alone. I understand. She hesitated. Then, but I'm not going to pretend what we had wasn't real. I won't let that part of it be ruined. The tears came then, mine, not hers. I nodded. Once. Then turned to leave. She didn't stop me. And that, somehow, hurt the most. Weeks later, I got a letter. From her. No return address. Just 3 lines. You didn't just break him. You broke me too. But I'm starting to feel whole again. And maybe one day we'll see who we are without the wreckage. I sat with that letter for hours. Not reading it. Just holding it. The war was over. Derek had lost his empire. Emily had reclaimed her life. And me? I wasn't sure if I was the villain, the victim, or just the fallout. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready to find out.